A death at a garden party brings class awareness to a young woman. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I found in my travels. Today, it is Short Story Tuesday, so I want to talk about an interesting short story that I've encountered. One that is about class and parties. I am referring to The Garden Party by Katherine Mansfield, which was published in 1922 in the Westminster Gazette. For those who don't know, Katherine Mansfield was a New Zealand writer who lived in the late 1800s and early 1900s. She frequently wrote short stories and novels quite a bit in her short life. She unfortunately died of tuberculosis at a relatively young age. But she had written a number of short stories and books, often focusing on existentialism, class, which you see here, and a lot of similar sort of ideas. It is believed that Katherine was bisexual in some way. She had relationships with both men and women, and there was documentation of her having relationships with women in New Zealand, which is pretty interesting. So there might be some of those elements infused in her writing, which people can go out and look for themselves. I might read one of her books down the road just to get an understanding of that, but that's for later. So without further ado, let's talk about The Garden Party. I'll do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So The Garden Party focuses primarily on Laura. She is a young woman from an upper-class family, and she is tasked with arranging this fancy garden party that the family is throwing. It's kind of fallen to her, so she's going around, very shy, but she talks to some workmen who seem to be pretty friendly to her, and she develops a little bit of a respect for them in the process. And then she goes off and does other tasks, including eating some cream puffs that a cook has made, and then I believe the cook for the party tells her that one of the workmen have died, and the family notes that he might have been drunk or something like that, but Laura didn't suspect that the workman might have been drunk at all. So she tries to talk about it and kind of work through her feelings because she's sad about it, and even ask if they should cancel the garden party, but the family is kind of indifferent about the workman, and they insist that the party has to go on. And then as they go through the party, there's some food left over, and Laura insists on giving some of that food to the workman's family to sort of pay tribute or honor the dead. And she goes and visits them. There's a little bit of uncomfortability there, as she's exposed to death and what what that family might think of their upper class family, given that the workman is from the lower classes. But she notes that he looks very peaceable in death, and she respects him based on their previous interaction, which was very brief. And then as the story comes to a close, Laura leaves, is met by her brother, and she asks her brother, isn't life, she can't really finish it, which it might be beautiful, isn't life sad sometimes? It's a bit unclear, but her brother answers, yes, life is, darling. And that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there's a fair bit to talk about with this story. One of the elements to the story that I think is the kind of centerpiece here is that of class. You see that kind of immediately because the story takes place at an upper class party. All the fancy elites are at this party, hanging out, and it's very clear that this is sort of an upper class affair. But Laura sees the The workman has a good interaction with them, but was encouraged not to really interact with them when she was younger. But she sees a little bit of the differences between her and the workmen. For one, the workmen are serving her family, doing work for her family, making the party great, even though they're probably not invited to the party. And so Laura is very aware of the rift, even if she can't vocalize it, even if she is not completely conscious of that sort of thing yet. But when she finds out that the workman has died, she feels a great deal for her fellow man. But the other family members, the other people at the party, view it as a peculiarity more so than anything else. It's not enough to stop the party for them. Like, the party just has to go on. And they seem to be rather annoyed that Laura is feeling anything at all. Like, didn't she get the memo? You're supposed to not really associate with the lower classes. Their lives are not supposed to affect you at all. Her mother specifically says something to her about that. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. "You are being very absurd, Laura," she said coldly. "People like that don't expect sacrifices from us, and it's not very sympathetic to spoil everybody's enjoyment as you're doing now," which is a pretty horrendous thing to say to your daughter, who is feeling something about the death of another person. But it's very specific, or very interesting, that she says, people like that don't expect sacrifices from us. Like, the poor people already know how things are. They don't expect the wealthy to really care about what happens to them. And that's the nature of the world, even though that should not be the nature of the world. But her family has decided to kind of make her class conscious, like bring her up to speed, bring her savvy to the way the world works according to them. And I think the realities of class become way more apparent when she goes and visits the workman's family, because they're all grieving. They've been crying for hours upon hours. Their faces are very puffy, and the workman is peaceable in death. And even though she has respect for them, she's comparing this to to her upper class family, who felt nothing and really merely remarked that it was unfortunate about what happened. So, how can this family be grieving and her family not be grieving at all, given that they're in close proximity? They're enough that Laura can just walk over and visit this family. It is kind of interesting that Laura is becoming class conscious, but you could also argue that it might be a little bit of class tourism. Laura wants to feel something, so she goes and walks amongst the poors and tries to experience what they're experiencing without ever really giving up the power or prestige or even the elite status that she has. Because she's going to be able to go back home and continue living the way that she is. I don't necessarily think Mansfield is touching upon that specifically. It is there in the story, I think. It's in the text, but Mansfield might not be really kind of addressing that. But it is interesting that Laura is able to kind of move freely and then also just go back to her pretty cozy life at the end. Another element of the story is the idea of out of sight, out of mind, like an avoidance of trying to face the horrors of the world. Because Mansfield shows Laura's family make, conscious efforts to avoid thinking about the horrors of the world. Like, Laura wants to talk about this death that happened, and her family's like, oh, don't think about it. Try a cream puff. Try some of the sandwiches that we have. Isn't this party marvelous? It's a concerted effort not to think about what's happening. And that way, it does kind of remind me a little bit of Edgar Allan Poe's The Mask of the Red Death, where the wealthy, go to their party, lock themselves away to avoid all the death that's happening in the countryside, but ultimately death comes for them anyways. You can't really escape the horrors of the world. You're going to have to face them one time or another, and it's better sooner rather than later, so you're not overwhelmed by those horrors. Her mother encourages her not to, really think about it in this story. And when her dad does bring it up, everyone kind of reacts with silence, like, how dare you kind of ruin our good vibe that we're having by talking about death, even though Death is something that happened nearby. It's something that humans need to grieve and need to sort of acknowledge. We have rituals for that sort of thing. But again, like, the family just doesn't want to think about it. And the point that I think Mansfield is trying to make is you can't avoid it forever. But at the same time, maybe you can, especially if you have a lot of money. You can certainly just, use your money to kind of escape that sort of thing. But that's not a good thing. I think Laura's mother is portrayed very coldly here and viewed with a little bit of disdain in Mansfield's writing, as opposed to Laura, who is viewed more positively for her attempts to kind of face that death, face some of the horrors of the world. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Garden Party by Katherine Mansfield. A pretty interesting short story, one that I think you should definitely check out. It's especially something that seems like it might be good for younger people. Yeah, a lot of, especially like high school, middle school, sort of thinking about these kind of ideas of class consciousness and death and things like that. I'll put a link to it in the description. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Would love to have a discussion about this. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this short story or this author if they don't know about either. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and party-based travels. Farewell.